Okay, we're live.
I'd like to call to order the April 8th meeting of the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village Schools Board Capital Planning Committee. And at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Woofter.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Garvey. I appreciate the introduction. And as all of you are aware, we have the linked agenda that was sent out to you prior to the meeting. I wanted to thank again Mr. Snavely for being on board as a district representative and community member, and also welcome Lori Bendel to our committee. This is the first time, so sorry about all the last minute homework and information we sent to you. We didn't expect you to read all that, but we'll go through it. And if you have any questions, along the way, obviously people can pause and we can ask those things too. So we basically have two items really on the front end of this meeting, and I know there was some discussion on the back end that Ashley's prepared as well too. So I'll kind of get into it, and I'm going to I know the board specifically has had a lot of updates over the last couple months on the projects we're doing for the summer. You've had a lot of written updates and a pretty comprehensive resource that I linked here under current projects. So if you want to link into that, I put it in Google Docs. And then also, if you don't like Google Docs, for those of you non-Google Doc people, there's a PDF linked there as well too. And I'll just walk through these 21 projects. They're really lined up now for the summer for the most part. So if you're in that document, it's basically 2021 PI projects. And these are the major updates that the committee would like to hear that are over $50,000. Our total revenue amount is 1.660 or 1.66 million, and for this PI cycle. If you guys remember back about this time last year with COVID hitting, we went and did some reductions. Those reductions then got backlogged. They're still on our list and they're backlogged, but these projects here represent all the projects over $50,000. First one the board did approve last night was an HVAC project. This is a 5-phase. We increased the phase amount to a 6-phase. This is phase 2 of 6. And it's been going really, really well. This phase focuses on Gurney, so almost all of the work in this $725,000 is going to be at Gurney. We're updating some electricity up there to add HVAC capacity, adding mechanicals and controls. We added some additional scope late in the design work and picked up some controls on the old pneumatic systems for the classrooms there. I think there's like 17 or 18 classrooms in the old corridors. And so those are going to now be on our automated logic system. So like I said, generator, I don't think we could have had better timing with adding a generator to the building, and that'll kind of take care of some of the core functions of the building if we have power outages. So that's that project. It came in a bit over budget. Ashley tells me that our SR2 funds that are coming in round 2. Jim and I know that from listening in on conversations, in webinars, that some of those SR2 monies would be able to be put towards this if that's deemed appropriate. They certainly qualify because of the air quality upgrade and the bipolar ionization that we're putting in that technology to the project. So this is going really well, and I'll just pause there if there's any questions. Okay. There we go. Jim, you don't have to answer any tough HVAC questions. We'll go on to paving. We're waiting. We were going to have paving numbers back today. We've extended the bid with a bid addendum to the 9th. So you'll see that says the 7th on there, but we've extended the bid addendum with some questions. We know we have 5 quality contractors that are bidding on that work. And Glenn Ramage, our project architect, is telling us that he believes that will be kind of close to budget, maybe a little below, maybe a little above. You'll see in each of these projects, we've linked the drawings and the design plans there if you want to get really granular. And then we've kind of created kind of a summary of what the project is in this view too. So if you want to see where the paving is. So it's partial paving, partial concrete. There's a lot of concrete walkways that are needing some updates, and then particularly the middle school lot, which is our worst paving area right now, and then some seal coating and some crack fill as well too, because really our paving is in a lot better shape than it was 3 or 4 years ago across the all 3 campuses. It's much better. And I think once it's just kind of like like warming up a cold room or a cold stove or something. Once you get it warm, it's easier, it's less energy to keep it warm. So we're going to try and keep that going with the paving in a way where we're going to hopefully see some reduced annual spends on the paving by just doing seal coating, top coating, and then making sure we're doing good crack fill and that sort of thing. So I think we're grateful about that for sure. There's a little bit of work on paving at Gurney as well too. So those numbers will come in, and then the board will see the approval for that project on the 21st of April at the next board meeting if everything goes as planned. Roofing, that's already been approved. We're about $20,000 under there. Those bids that we awarded to the lowest bidder. And, we have I believe next week is our first kickoff meeting for a pre-construction meeting. So we're going to try and keep those folks on point. Ryan's done a really good job. Ryan Schmidt from TDA has done a very good job with us in organizing our teams prior to construction. And just having weekly meetings with that. So we'll be doing that. Jim's taken a strong lead in that area, and we're really grateful for that. LED project that came in below budget as well too. You can see by probably I could do the math there, but 17 or 18,000, a little bit below. And we had a great bid coverage on that. I think we had something like 14 or 15 bidders, the most bidders we've ever seen. So that's good. And it gives us the ability to, kind of look at additional LED changeover, maybe on the interior side in the future, because we do have a future interior project that we'll look at too. So that was good. Sanitary line project, the board approved that. It's a partnership with the village on utilizing USI. And they actually began the work over spring break. So they're already, into that project. And we are holding a bit of a contingency. I think we've burned into about $5,000 of the contingency with some unforeseen, but we have about 7,000 more on that contingency within that project there too. So there's that. And then I also, for those of you who are interested in the other projects, there's a link down there to all of the projects that are under the $50,000 threshold. We've been working on those as well too. Some of our allocations for environmental or engineering, but some of them are simple things like updating flooring, in certain areas too. So all of those projects are underway, and we feel really good about it from a budget perspective. And I think we feel really good about our total, project array for the summer there too. I'm just going to pause. I'm going to let Jim add anything on that, and then also open up to questions too.
Chris, I really don't have anything unless somebody had questions about any changes or issues that we had with any of the projects. The projects for this year, I think, are fantastic. We've got good timing as far as getting this done now. The escalation in pricing, I think, in the next couple of years is going to be dramatic. So I'm glad we're getting the opportunity to do these. The sewer project pricing on getting this done and doing it this way. One of the issues that Chris was talking about is they had to do some additional reinforcements for some of the lining of the pipe based on the way it's laid out on the property. But if we would have to replace that pipe instead of reline it, especially the one that runs down the ravine, the cost on that would have been astronomical. So I'm really glad in getting the pricing along with the village. We were going to have to do this because we did have areas of damage. That project was the right time, and it's going to do very well for us. Happy about the LED project. The long-term savings on that is going to be tremendous, and not just the savings, but the quality of product that we're going to put out. Because the regular bulbs burn out frequently enough where we've always seemed to have some out. And I've talked to the crews that do our replacement, and they said generally by the time they drive back on a large project, there are other bulbs that are already burned out. So moving to LED is going to help us tremendously. And the pricing was decent.
Yeah, and also to add another wrinkle there, not a wrinkle, but information on the project. We have reached out to South Russell Village and to the Village of Chagrin Falls for the relamping project on the exterior, and Ryan sent them information. Both of them have, have given us their approval, knowing that these are relamping and we're not relocating any new poles. So, that's out there as well too. I know that was something we've wanted to make sure we checked on, and we've gotten, written confirmation back from both on that. So that was a question there too. So I'll pause to see if there's any other questions about any of the projects from the committee.
I have a couple, or one. So HVAC and paving, it says 5-year. Is that are these contracts being executed over 5 years?
We revisit them every year. So we just rewarded year 2 just recently, like last night at the board meeting. So we have 2 contractors that we're working with that they're holding their pricing on the mechanicals and on the controls side. And so we're vetting all that out, and then we bid out the electric work with those as well too. So it's all been running through Eric Wright from Wright Engineering, and then so like to answer your question directly, Pete, sorry about that, but yeah, it's an annual look each year. So we don't have the money, we don't have contracts for beyond each year, and they have to perform or we'll go somewhere else, but we also want to make sure we have some continuity with with the installation and the controls and all that. And they seem to be doing a really good job.
Okay. So the 725 for HVAC gets spent this year, and whatever the paving numbers come in at, 190 call it, that all gets spent this year.
Yes, it is. That's all this year budget. The 5-year looks out, if you click into that, and it's usually 6-year now. It's a pretty heavy number. In fact, next year, as we get into next year's numbers, you'll see, HVAC is, I want to say, there's a couple numbers in here for 660 at the 712 or at the high school, and then there's a 315 number at the middle school. So that's a $985,000, and that looks at upgrading the chillers and adding chilling capacity to the high school as well too. So that's definitely due and needed. And we may make some modifications as we go along in the design. We haven't bought the design. We typically buy the design work for the HVAC in usually in September or October. They begin the design work, and then they begin out, vetting that, and then getting it out to bid in January. And so that's kind of just an annual thing that rolls back through. So we only buy design work kind of annually, but we did buy kind of an upfront project, schematic, at the front part of that just gives a design development understanding. And it's been really helpful because we've been pretty close on the numbers too.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you move on, Chris, I just want to commend you. That is a very concise summary document, and you just went through a lot of projects in 15 minutes that I know there's a lot more behind it than that. So thank you. The level of organization is really incredible, and I reflect back on a little bit over 2 years that this committee has been functioning, and I think it's become a well-oiled machine, and that's a lot due to your leadership. So thank you for that. I have one kind of a side comment, just something for us to think about. As you know, we've been engaged in a search for a new superintendent, and part of that involved getting input from the community on strengths and weaknesses of the district. And it was interesting to me to hear continued feedback with concern about our facilities. And I wonder if we've turned the corner on that really with our community, if they really know what is happening with the increased investment, the type of projects that are really, bringing Gurney up to current standards and all of the campuses. And so I just wanted to plant the seed that I think there's an opportunity to do a little bit more regular outreach to our community. Maybe it's quarterly or twice a year in the Super News. There's like an overview of here's what's going on with facilities. Maybe there's an article in the paper, but just to kind of plant that seed, I think we're doing a lot of really good stuff, and we want to always continue to let our community know that we're spending their money wisely and taking good care of our school buildings.
So it was a good comment.
Yeah, agree. Thank you. Make very certainly noted. I will handle that. Any other questions about the projects before we move on to 2022? Okay, so if you want to go back into the agenda, you can click in on the link. Now I've got a few links here for you, but probably the best one to look at if you want to, we want to kind of be, pretty careful here on the summary is there's a link under 2022 fiscal year projects over 50,000. So that says our focus will be on this document for the discussion. And that's all of the projects for next year, this coming fiscal year, starting 2022, that are over $50,000. And it's in this Excel spreadsheet format, that has the scorecard total and the budget amount as well too. So I'll walk through those projects and just talk through them specifically. You've got a couple on here already. There's 2 bus replacements. If you remember, we paused on the bus replacements this current fiscal year because of COVID. And we're doing really well on bus replacements. We have a whole schedule for that. We're reducing the overall average age of our bus. But Mike Morgan and I just worked to put together a purchase for buses, for 2 additional buses. And Ashley kind of gave us the go ahead to purchase those now, getting this year's pricing before July 1. And so we're doing that through high school councils through the bid. So we'll buy our 2022 buses now, and we'll probably receive them sometime this summer. And those 2 new buses will come out, and we'll outfit them with cameras and get them going. And then we'll remove 2 of our buses out of our fleet. So you're familiar with that process if you've been around. That's a vehicle replacement piece. Also on here, just jumping down, you've got, as I mentioned, the HVAC Phase 3 project. The focus there is on the middle school and the high school, and it's upgrading the cooling system with an additional 110-ton chiller that focuses on I believe the classroom section of the high school, and then there's some additional controls and VAV box work on the middle school too. So, all tying all those into automated logic. Any question on those projects? I probably know just a high level about that, much about them. As we get into the planning and engineering, we'll involve our engineer, Eric, right, in a little bit more detail, early next fiscal year. Any questions on that? Okay. Roofing, we picked up an alternate this summer in the 2021. So that number right there for roofing, we may scale back. If it says re-roof sections D in E and L, if selected in summer 2021 as alternates. So those selections happen. So we may be reducing that number in that amount for 130,000 by, I just have to determine the order of magnitude. So there's some trimming there because we picked up an alternate on the front end here and advanced that work. But we'll still do some roof work that summer. Paving, again, there's probably a little bit of trimming there as well too. But one of the lots that's going to need paved is this would be the east side lot here, which we call the admin lot. That's going to need to be paved, and some additional top coating and seal coating too. So we'll vet those projects, more than just a conceptual, and as we get into the fall, and we'll go through that. And then, we talked about that, the bus garage design work, we broke it down into phases. There's a 3-phase process, and we'll begin that work as well too. That's in here. And then this one here, this next one down here, domestic water distribution. Jim and I just really need to do some additional work on that. We're not quite sure where we're at on that one. When we put this on the list, this really has to do with what this has to do with. It would be adding a large containment tank somewhere on the property, and maybe looking at upgrading a well. We have a really good engineer that we work with on the water out there now that we really like, that helped install the chlorination tanks. And so we just need to have him take a look and say, is that still needed? If so, to what extent? We do have water housed on the property. Jim probably knows the number of gallons, but that's in the chlorination tank. So at one point we had talked about having kind of a holding tank out there, for domestic water, maybe outside, maybe attached to the comfort station. It would be a really nice thing to have. I don't know it's necessarily a need, but we're always trying to invest in that water system there too. So that could get trimmed. It could get pushed out a year. I'm just not really sure. I don't want to say we're going to do that for sure until we just know a little bit more about that. But those wells out there, they were inspected. They're doing a great job, but we just have to kind of figure out when we want to look at upgrading there. So that's that. And then some additional paving, but that's on the Gurney site. That'll probably happen to that same extent. And then there's a couple things that aren't in the notes. One is, as I mentioned, we'll need to refine that domestic water project a little bit. And then I'd like to look at some additional concrete work here on this campus. Jim and I have been noticing some of the capping on the parapet walls when you walk around this campus that are kind of decaying. You'll see that if you walk around here. We've been trying to address those kind of, a few every year, but there's a lot of them. There's some back by the high school kitchen. There's some over by the middle school. A lot of that stuff needs tuck pointed and, cleaned up underneath. And then, some of our, curbs need some work as well too. And we'll just have to assess how that stuff has made it through the winter, and take a look at that as well too. So I'd probably look at maybe 75,000 in that. And then another project we're probably going to do, we've actually vetted this one already. If you remember, we had a high school window project we did last summer that was pretty small, maybe like $50,000. There's still probably a handful, and it's probably a dozen or so windows that are still single pane windows here at the high school. We had some bids to do that work, and to replace the single pane windows. We haven't done that. We need to do it when students are out, because there's some ACM in some of the caulking that we want to make sure we're usually do when kids are out of the building. So we'll probably try and do that work. It's about $75,000 to $80,000 of window work in summer 2022. But then on the good side of that, we have a bigger window project in summer 2024 for about $300,000, which will either probably reduce that quite a bit, or just see if there's windows that, at that point need to be replaced. But 2022 will take care of all of our single pane windows, not just on this campus, but, across the district at that point, too. So, I think that's pretty much all I've got on the project list there. Is there any questions on that?
I just want to jump back up to a little bit of a higher level. Can you remind us what your budget is for next year? And then also, I was trying to quickly add all those things up in my head, but I know those are just projects over 50,000. So how are you doing right now? What's the unallocated money for next year?
Yeah, so I think what I've got from the FIP is 1.96 million, or just $40,000 shy of $2 million. So that's kind of where we're at. And I think that's what Ashley's got for my number, or pretty close to that.
For 22, yes, 1960.
Good,
1.96.
perfect. Yep, that's what's in the FIP. That's what we've got for 2022. I didn't add these 2 additional projects for 75,000. I just haven't vetted them yet. And like I said, there may be some trimming of, because of the roof, because of the water distribution. I don't know. We'll probably know a little bit more of that probably maybe October. We'll probably have better numbers on some of these things.
So you have the funds you need to do the priority projects. Are there any additional ones that have been backlogged that we haven't talked through for next year? Or are you getting into that next, Chris?
Yeah, I have backlogged them there, and they're actually on the sheet, that one of these links here down there for you. I think maybe complete 5-year project list, or you can look and see. I think I used to keep backlogging projects by year. I just backlogged all of them into a bank at the end. I don't know, when we pick up, I have to go through those backlog projects and just say, hey, when do we have to do these, or where do they fit in? I used to think backlogging projects was a bad thing, but it actually kind of is a good thing in that, it allows us to look for projects that are project ready when we have to move them up, or or if there's a grant out there or something like that. So yeah, they're all kind of at the end, and I don't know. I don't anticipate us moving one up in its entirety, but I won't be able to really tell you that until maybe end of summer, early fall.
So I have a question. Not exactly sure how to frame it, but I mean, this all sounds good. And I'm certain that if you thought there was something life-threatening, it'd be on the table for discussion, but I got to ask the question. There's nothing out there that's life-threatening, is it? Is there? I mean, big, I'm talking, I use that term loosely.
No, there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there that's life-threatening, that's big, that we're worried about, that's pressing. No.
Good. Okay.
And let me just say, we have mechanisms for that if that popped up, right? I mean, not only do we have a contingency, but even if it went beyond contingency, we pull the committee together, and then we go to the board and then address that too, right? So, we certainly wouldn't hold anything like that back at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just a question that needs to be asked every so often.
I think it's a great question, and I think I feel much more comfortable answering that question now with the knowledge base I have than I did 5 years ago. Yeah.
And I believe that we have talked about some of the big items, but they're not life-threatening, and there's time. The horizon we have on those aren't immediate. And what I'm talking about is like major systems when it comes to like the fire alarm system. It's stuff that's aging but working.
Right.
It's not issues that are not working or getting ready to fail. It's just something that we've got on the horizon that are planned out in the future. And we're working on those now, trying to get, the best possible way to get things done as far as most economical.
So fire alarm in particular is a good one because, at some point you find, at least this is what I've seen, the system is not repairable. It's just become so functionally obsolete that you can't even find parts and people understand it.
That's absolutely correct. And right now we're able to source parts, but that's where we're at, is sourcing parts. Now we are looking at alternatives because the projections that we have in our capital plans are quite expensive, but we're looking at ways that other districts have replace their panels and replace their devices in the existing buildings that weren't new construction, that were able to do that without going to the new type of system, new box, new devices, but not changing all the wiring in the whole building.
Not triggering a major rehab kind of a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes. So we're working on that now.
Well, and I'll mention that Jim does a great job of continuing to do the preventive maintenance on all of those items for sure with his team. We use Corson, and we'll typically, get after that, get alerts when we need to repair or there's a trouble, that sort of thing. It gets monitored. But, Pete, a good question, because, if we looked out, we actually had this conversation as a committee. We put it in 2023 for the high school 712 campus, $500,000, and then also at Gurney. So that's actually coming up right around the corner. It's in the next group of projects, and the scorecard number on that's pretty high, obviously, because it's a safety item, and the probability, or the impact of failure is huge. But right now the probability of failure on those is low. Of a failure, but they are aging, and TDA did in their master plan document a look at that, and they said at the time when they put that together that it was a 3 to 5 year replacement, and so that would be on the 3-year side when we're hitting the 2023 too. And I don't know, and maybe I've never gone through a fire alarm system replace. Maybe that sounds like a pretty and that's like electrical or HVAC, or like an electrical engineer probably does that work on the design side. Do electrical contractors on the low voltage side do that typically, or specialized people?
All the above.
Okay.
It's a little bit no man's land. Usually we actually do it through contractors typically, because they seem to know how to wiggle, and it's a very slippery slope when it comes to the fire marshal and today's standards versus yesterday's standards. And we all know that these systems were put in place yesterday, and they're just not current. And the fire marshal, in their wisdom and trying to do the right thing by the world, they want to upgrade and make as safe as humanly possible, but that can cost a ton of money, as you well know. So, we typically would do it through a subcontractor and do sort of a design build thing. Now, I'm not sure that the way the school system is set up, you can do that, but if that is a possibility, I certainly want you to look at it.
And we very well might be able to do that. I think that's a good process. I certainly will keep you posted as we're getting into the design work on that for sure. I could really use your input and guidance. We put them together in the same year to maybe see if we could get some, I don't know, value with doing both at the same time as well too. And so that's kind of what we're doing in 2023.
Okay. Cool.
But to be clear, as we stand now, we're still able to source parts, and the systems are working. It's not the systems, it's what you mentioned earlier. It's the fact that when we have a device, we just can't order it out of the catalog. You have to have connections to be able to find it, which we currently have. And they have to, the last time it happened, they're expediting parts. People are meeting, they're having them flown in, they're driving down here to get things up so we can get back in. So, but we have sources, and like I said, systems are working. And mostly what we're talking about, a failure of what used to be a $75 device.
Well, one of the, kind of shifting the conversation a bit, and just for, sort of a conversation, we're seeing a lot of materials just becoming unavailable, whether it's pipe or appliances or, doesn't matter what. I mean, plywood, you just can't get it. And it's not even about the money. It's about availability. And quite candidly, we haven't quite figured out why. It's is it legitimately created by COVID and people didn't go to work, or is it just an excuse to, kind of raise prices? We haven't sorted that through, but it is a reality that we're seeing. And so, I would say as you go through and you're contracting for all of these projects, just make certain that you can, on a schedule, get what you need. Obviously through the vendors and the subcontractors, but that's becoming a real issue for us. I mean, we're fighting a real fight, both on the budget side, in our construction group and on schedule because of availability.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're really trying to do. We're doing some pre-construction meetings here, even in April, when we normally would be waiting. But we're trying to do that. We ask some of the same questions, especially on the HVAC side too. The nice thing about that project is it's a replacement project while the current system's in place. So, we're not having any. We're not having any significant downtime. So we'll see. But it's certainly good. And that with the Suez Canal and everything like that, we've been trying to, stay ahead of that. Yeah. But that's one point.
I can tell you that I just left a meeting with contractors right before this meeting, and the board approved it last night. And I can tell you the contractor is working right now, making sure, trying to line. It's actually switchgear he's talking about, but it's one of those things where everybody is cognizant of it, or most that are, and they're working on it. Because you're right, it's very difficult right now to be able to locate and get products that normally were available in. And lead times seem to be great.
Lead times and pricing is good for about 30 seconds. I mean, we're just seeing, we go to contract and we're getting calls from contractors saying, I can't live with it. So, we have to navigate that. So you're on it. I just wanted to raise that up as something we're seeing, and it sounds to me like you're dealing with it appropriately. So keep going. Good job.
Any other questions from the committee before we hand over to Ashley and the budget? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, and to your team. Mrs. Brudno, hi.
Hi. So, Chris actually covered most of what I would have for this committee on the agenda. He gave you a nice summary. I tied that into the 5-year forecast. That does tie to what we did in November. The 21 number, that $340,000 that we kind of kicked the can down the road as the commitment to the community. That's the 1.66 number. It's the 2 million minus that 340. On our estimates, we moved, and I'm looking at my forecast over here on the screen. We moved that 340 into years 24 and 25, assuming that those projects, there's still things that need to be done. We were just trying to kind of get out of COVID and get down to a place where hopefully things are a little bit more stable and we have a better picture of what's happening. But we know that there's still things that need to be done, and that's all worked into Chris's plan as well, which does tie into the 5-year forecast. Tax collections affect the amount that we would transfer from the general fund, but it doesn't affect the PI fund because we've committed to stay at that $2 million right now. The really good news is, the balance in the PI over the last couple of years, because we have funded it to the 2 million, haven't quite spent 2 million every year. The balance is building up, so that's fantastic. I think that kind of, takes some of the pressure off and kind of addresses what your question was, Pete, about, if something comes up, what, and it's catastrophic, what do you do? We do have some cushion in there, to kind of take care of those items if they do come up. Looking at the fund balance in front of me, and at the end of 18, the PI fund balance was $650,000. Right now, we're looking at about 2 million at the end of this year, even with the projects that we've committed to. So we're doing, really well. A lot of that is because projects in those last few years, I think, from what I can tell, 'cause some of it was before I was here, but it looks like things were budgeted for initially to happen in the PI fund. And then when the building fund came and with the bond monies, we did a lot of projects all over the campus, not just the intermediate school. So some of those projects alleviated the stress on the PI fund. So that helps that too. So that balance is looking, it's looking great. I think it really helps us with that comfort level of, if something comes up, or if some of these items that we have backlogged, if Chris or Jim come to us and say, we need to pull this out of the backlog and it needs to get done, we've got a little room there. That's really all I would have on the budget, because Chris pretty much summarized it all for you already. I don't know, Catherine, did you want to talk about bus garage and kind of how immediate that this committee thinks that need is, and if we want to start working on that and maybe take some of this balance here and kind of use some of that for at least the start of a bus garage talk?
Well, before we do that, I think we should touch on it, and I'll give a little bit of an overview of how that relates to the board and to the board finance committee as well. But before we do that, Chris, we did allocate the $90,000 to do preliminary design. Is that in 21, 22?
Yeah, so the 2022, the fiscal year 2022, which happens this coming July, is phase one of the design work for the transportation. That's $90,000, and that's built into the PI number, that 1.96 number that Ashley alluded to before. So that's in there. That's phase one. It includes initial 50% contract documents on the design side. And it also includes a site survey, geotechnical, environmental, and document printing. And then phase two, which is not in our budget of the design work, we could, I'm sure we could execute those in succession anytime we would like to. After phase one would be additional $74,000. And that gets us to final 50% contact documents on the design side. There's a traffic study in here that I think that people had some questions about, and I talked to Ryan at TDA, and he said it's just a hold number on there for that. He doesn't believe there will have to be a traffic study, but he wanted to put it in there. It's a pretty hefty number. But I do know if a traffic study has to happen, it's a lot of money, but he doesn't really think there will have to happen. And then there's plan approval fees. So that's phase two. And then I don't think I linked this in there. It might be linked in the previous agenda or something, but I just pulled it up. I can send it to the committee. So that's a long answer. Sorry.
And so Chris, just to confirm, so I'm looking at the FIP now. If you guys want to open up the FIP link, page 7 has the recommended approach for the transportation facility. So just to make sure I'm understanding, it says the preliminary design work is fiscal year 22. So that's this cycle, right? Ending July of next year. So that work would be done starting early next summer. Is that what you just said?
We would start executing the design contract probably as early as July or August, I think. Right, of this coming year, this coming summer, like, okay. As soon as there's really any bandwidth to do that, we could do it. And then I think, you probably get the site survey and the geotechnical stuff done on the front end. Because then you can find out how much, if there's significant earthwork up there that's going to be needed and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we would start doing that. We'd probably buy that work, and we already have a quotation for it, so we could probably put that to the board and, even in as early as July if we wanted to do that.
So and then we talked about, we had identified at our last meeting, there's really a need for us to start earmarking funds for this project. It's kind of in the sweet spot where it's not big enough for us to go out to the community for a bond issue, but it's big enough that it's a significant chunk of, our PI dollars. And so knowing that 2 to 3 years from now, we need to have those funds to build the bus garage, that we wanted to look at different ways to start putting funds aside. So to me, let's just back up a little bit. Big picture. First is, I think revisiting what is needed and intersecting with the design process. I want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to help guide the architects on, and I think we need to have a budget for this project based on what we think we can set aside in the next 2 to 3 years, and try to help our architects find that beautiful intersection between what we can afford and what we need. If they tell us what we need is something we can't afford, we need to know that sooner rather than later. But I do believe there are some creative solutions here where we need to come together and give very clear guidance on what the budget is and try to get to a result from the architects that is acceptable, or, and also know what we're giving up and what that would cost. If they're saying, okay, we can meet, I'll just throw out a number. We say $1.5 million is all we can afford. And they say, okay, we can do that, but you're giving up this piece. And this committee and the board finance committee are going to have to come back and say, can we find those additional monies? And is it worth it in order to get a better product? So that's a lot of different parts coming together that I think we just need to start thinking through. Like, when is the board going to get involved with that piece? Ashley has set up for us to talk to the board finance committee in early May, and we can start talking about what we can afford and how we can start setting aside funds to pay for the project. So Ashley, that's kind of, I guess, my big picture overview of how I see that the bus garage conversation happening between those three entities. And I'm open to your thoughts about engaging this committee in any of the financial pieces, if you like, or this committee has reviewed the preliminary, Pete, you were here, I think, and heard from Ryan about the preliminary master planning feedback about the bus garage and what was needed. I think short of having the architect here, though, I would hesitate to get into a deep conversation about challenging what the master planning document identified.
Question. In my mind, 2.1 million is a number that I think I've heard.
Right.
Is that right?
And that was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I promise you it's more today. So whatever that means more. So I think I like your thinking that, figure out what you can afford and then design to that. And there might be a sacrifice, let's make it up for a minute. Maybe the parking lot's not paved for a year or two. Maybe you put a gravel parking lot in for a couple of years and you pave it later. I mean, there's always ways to, walk into your budget. But I think that's probably where you need to start, is what can you set aside and what can you really afford to spend. When you're done doing what you do for the board, you can come work for me, because that's my daily life.
We did have a cost construction estimate at 22.183 million, or 2.12 almost, or 2.2 almost, that Gilbane did in the deep dive back in May of 2019, and I think we've sent that out and linked that before too. It was with modest equipment. There wasn't a dedicated wash bay, And, much of the estimate was in I can't remember, maybe 600,000 was actually in site work, and really not much extra square footage. So I just would try and I do agree that I think it makes sense to design to a number, but I think I would make sure not only do we have an architect give us a cost estimate, we probably need to have some preliminary cost estimates by, people in the construction field as well too. Because I just don't want us to be in a place where we're disappointed, or we're too far down the line. But again, I think the approach makes a whole lot of sense. Having the phased design work, and then engaging this committee in the review of maybe cost projections, and have we can have multiple people do cost projections to it.
This is this is an ultimately simple project, and I think if you're going to spend $90,000 to get a conceptual 50% design done, you'll know what your numbers are. I mean, this is not brain damage at all. And I would also say that Gilbane probably put an estimate together, but that's probably not the right contractor for this piece of work. I mean, they're great. They've done a great job for the system, and they're just a good company. But there's littler guys that can handle this much more efficiently than.
Yeah, I think they actually did even personally say that's probably, unless there's some kind of a, specialty group within them, they're probably not interested in a project that size. But you're exactly right, Pete.
So it's an iterative process, Chris. I think we need to start with the board finance committee, and we need to look to see where this money is going to come from, and we need to look at that reality. We may have some tiers, like we know we can find $1 million. We're not sure if we can find, so we need to have that tough discussion. And then I would propose that information go to the board, and we marry that information with the master planning information that we have already. And but what I really want to see, and I want to underscore this, is that before we engage with the architect, that the board has given a very clear direction on what the job of the architect is. If we are trying to hit a budget, if we're going to ask them to do, option 1 and option 2, I just want us to be really clear about what we're asking from them, because I don't want to just get the dream bus garage that's, almost $4 million or something like that. I think we need to put parameters around this that are very, very clear for everybody. So, so I think that's probably the best next step is let's, Ashley, I think that maybe clears some things up with what board finance needs to be really looking at. It's how much can we afford? And then also I think that group is a great group to look at the accounting measures that we can use to allocate that money appropriately and put it aside. And then coming back to the board after that. And, Chris, if you want, we may want to invite the master planning committee to be part of that discussion with the board, so we can just really flesh out, the goals that we want to give to our architect. So I guess.
So to make sure I understand that, prior to the architect engaging in the phase 1 design work, we'd like the board to be involved with that. And when you say the board, do you mean through the board capital planning committee? Is that the best venue, or?
I think probably board presentation, because basically before we engage in a contract this should be in the contract for the design work of what the board is asking of the architects. And I think it's going to end up going to the board anyway, because we're going to be executing a contract. So we may as well do it at a board meeting. And obviously could invite this group and the finance committee and the master planning, which is a lot of overlap there. They're all the same people, to be part of that discussion with the board, so the board can give that guidance. Does that make sense? And I guess timing wise, I mean, I'd be looking to you. Obviously we have a lot going on right now, and we've got the summer coming. maybe you can get a gauge of if this meeting were to happen in August, is that sufficient? That would give us, I think, plenty of time. Ashley, is there any issue there from a finance perspective?
No, what we're doing on the 5-year forecast right now is just an update. We're not doing a whole new forecast. So yeah, I mean, as long as I had time from there before the November forecast,
right,
we're fine.
Okay. So then, Chris, just as long as you feel like that's, understanding it might take us a meeting or two to get to a contract with real clear parameters, I'd look to you to give us a sense of when we need to start having those discussions. But I think if we can wait till August, it makes a lot of sense because of just a lot of changes in the district.
Yep, makes sense. I agree. I noted August, and I think that does make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And time-wise, that would still queue us up, right, for the following summer, if any.
What I would just want to make sure that we would be able to get the site survey done when the weather's decent and the geotechnical. I don't mean that they probably could do those are in the winter time, but probably just a lot easier to do them in October or November, before the snow hits.
Sure. Well, if we start in August, we should be okay there, I would think. Okay. That's all I have.
Just curious, how is the bus garage? I mean, I know it's undersized. I know it's not ideal. Are there any, are we worried about anything like not working or falling apart right now?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a great analogy, but it's like an old reliable truck, or something. But if something, and at this point, we know how to, if the alternator goes, we know how to fix it. It's not a computer generated car. And, so we did, if you remember last summer, set aside about $15,000 of just money in the PI budget to fix things at the bus garage. We haven't spent that all. We've spent a little bit. We put an overhead door in, I think, a couple months ago. Jim's had some general maintenance work on the facility, but it is not. It hasn't eaten into that $15,000 even at all, and the surface continues to be acceptable and adequate. We had them do a survey of the pavement when they did this paving project for this summer as well too. So it continues to kind of hang in there. Okay, it fared all right over the winter on the pavement side. So the fence is pretty rusty looking in some places, and the block heaters are getting old and need repaired. But Mike's done some really good things with some equipment. In fact, we just actually did a really nice upgrade with purchasing some bus washing equipment that he can set up and use outside as well. And so that's a great thing. It really extends the life of our bus. We've been pushing our crews to do more bus and vehicle washing on a regular basis. And I think we did a drain replacement too, along with all that too. So yeah, in general, it continues to function, but it's undersized and there's no meeting room in it, and it's a bit it's a bit challenging from just a usage perspective.
Chris, I think what we said last time is our financial exposure for that building, for that facility, is minimal because it is a block building which is going to stay upright. The heating system is simple. It's not like we have a boiler system out there that's running the bus garage. Basically, it's a block building that's fed with the water and electric from the main building, and we really don't have tremendous financial exposure by leaving that building up. We're not going to.
We had someone do a roof inspection on it recently too, so there's no concern on the roof too. We've got a couple of years on the roof at least.
And even putting a roof on wouldn't be a catastrophic expense. So really, that building will be there. It's not great, but as far as we're not exposing the district to some kind of financial issue by having it there. I think Pete talked about it last time a little bit because after seeing it.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you just said. It's it's just not. It'd be really nice to replace it as soon as possible, but it's just not necessary.
Bob or Phil, I was just looking at the calendar. It looks like August 11th, we have a board meeting scheduled. I know that's right before school starts. I just wanted to make sure I touch base with both of you about the timing of this. Do you have any concerns about adding that to an agenda for August 11th?
Not right now.
No, other than just bringing the new superintendent up to speed so they can kind of be involved in
Right.
that conversation and have enough information. But I think that allows for plenty of time.
Okay.
And the only other thing, to remember, and we cut, quite a bit to get to where we needed to be with the last operating levy. So I have a feeling that next round is going to be a little more painful depending on how much you need to get. So just keep that in mind as well.
The next levy round?
No, if you're trying to carve out another, let's use the $2.1 million number, there's going to be some tough decisions in that.
Right, because we've already reduced our facility expenditures. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting, and again, the confluence of these two committees is going to be so important because the finance committee can't decide what PI projects, can wait. So it'll be important, Chris, for your team to be involved with that.
I think it'd be real challenging to capture all that through PI. I think you're going to have to look at general fund as well.
Yeah, I agree. Or other.
I think the other piece,
money tree.
I think the other piece to this that may end up being good news for us is, the ESSER 3 money is coming as well. That's going to be even more than our ESSER 2. We may be able to, any HVAC or things like that. I know some of that is already in process, but some of those expenditures can be moved, and we can use that money for that. So that might help us to free up some funds there. And then the other thing, Chris, I don't know if you've heard anything about how much schools can expect or what we're going to be allowed to do with it, but Biden's jobs plan, there's starting to be some talk about the commitment to infrastructure, and some of that may be going to schools for projects as well. So that could be, I know I'm not normally the optimistic sunshiny person, but that may bring us some unexpected money as well. So.
I would lobby to put in the budget $3 a week to buy a Powerball ticket.
That's where the money tree is.
There you go.
On that
the
note,
state auditor would have an issue with that. That's not a proper public purpose.
Oh, I see.
All right. So finance will be talking in May. We meet quarterly. So usually I think that's July, August. I forget, Chris. I think I had that just pulled up. I don't know if you had any thoughts about penciling in our next meeting.
yeah, I think it says third. Yeah, the third quarter says July through September, and I think we're going to probably want to recoup and re-engage some of our engineers and architects at the end of this year. July and August really are out the window, but it's probably would be September would be, if we're looking at the FIP and the budget for 2022, which, I think for 2022, you've already looked at those projects, right? So, but 2023 stuff coming up in the budget, I think you'd probably want to know what that stuff is. So we'll try and have a little bit of that refined by that meeting for sure. Maybe to the same degree we have for 2022 now, so I think that sounds great. If we could do, early September, I think we'd maybe the second or third week of September gives us a little bit of time, assuming that school starts as normal this coming year.
Okay. So if you don't mind, if you'll kind of start putting the FIP together, I know the pieces and parts are all there, but maybe a draft document that we would have prior to that, and, figure out what date works best for everybody for that. The only piece I could see is if, does this committee want to see what the finance committee comes up with before that meeting in August with the board? Or Chris, do you just want to kind of hear back from the finance committee about what we think we can afford, and then be prepared at the board meeting to talk about what projects would have to be put on the back burner? Are you following me? So for example, if we say we think we can find 2 million for the bus garage, that could be the budget for the architects. Chris, you'll need to be prepared to tell us what that means as far as if $500,000 or $1 million of that's coming out of your budget, what does that mean as far as what projects are not happening then in the next 2 to 3 years? So anyway, I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think I think all I need is a number.
Okay.
And then I can,
and you can let us know.
pull together a slate of recommended things to remove, almost like we did last year, when we did it for COVID, right? And we just kind of, said, okay, here's the things I'm really recommending we remove. And here's some things we might really want to consider, but, maybe not, so I could put together kind of a list like that.
Totally great. And that was perfect because it was kind of like level 1, level 2, level 3, it starts to hurt a little bit more. And that would be a great gradient for the board to understand as we're making that decision. So, all right. Anybody else? Anything else on other business? Chris, do you have anything? Ashley? All right, then I think we can conclude our meeting.
We've got 38 minutes. We can't go yet.
Sorry, I think I erroneously set the meeting too long, but you get off a little early. And Pete, if you still want to stay on, you can help us design the back part of the bus garage. There's an exterior, porch area that I think you're really good at designing.
Happy with that.
All right, enjoy this gorgeous day. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.